Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And very good evening to you and welcome to Newsline Recording. My guest this evening is Ms. Rain Wickrematunge. Shall we say, her husband was, of course, the late Lasantha Wickrematunge, easily Sri Lanka's best known newspaper editor and journalist, I would dare say too. A friend of this network and the founding editor of the then most outspoken newspaper in Sri Lanka, and unlikely to be repeated again, I dare say too, the Sunday Leader. And Rain Wickrematunge has written a book about I suppose, the life and times of Lasantha Wickrematunge, and very appropriately named it Unbowed and Unafraid, and that in two words would describe Lasantha Wickrematunge the best, really. Very good evening to you, Rain, and welcome to the program.
Good evening, Faraz. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be able to welcome you on this program and to the Capital Maharaja Group. Lasantha was, of course, one of us here at the group, and shared a deep and personal friendship with my late chairman, Kili Rajamandran. And I suppose Lasantha and Ms. Rajamandran shared one thing in common. They were both unbowed and unafraid.
That's right, yes.
It's about, what, 14 years now?
14 years since the murder, yes.
How angry are you 14 years on?
14 years on, the anger is no longer there. Of course, when it first happened, there was shock, there was devastation, there was a lot of anger. But the anger has subsided now. I think it was in the nature of both Lasantha and me. We didn't hang on too much to whatever happened to us. Despite being, assaulted, house shot at, all these things happened. But you just go on without hanging on to too much anger. So at the moment, yes, we are still devastated by the fact that he's no longer with us. But it's not fueled so much by anger anymore.
Were you ever were you also attacked at some point?
I was in the thick of it because that was 1 year into publication of the Sunday Leader, 1995. On the way back home after work, yes, we were waylaid, and 4 masked thugs dragged Lasantha out of the vehicle and started hitting him. So I jumped into the thick of it from the driver's side of the car, into the thick of it, and I jumped on Lasantha's body and covered his head, because I thought they were going to attack his head and him. And then they hit me. But at that moment, I remember I resolved that I wouldn't, even if I get 100 of these blows, I'm not going to move from here. At that time, I don't know, there's some courage that you get from, I don't know from where. And with that one blow to me, they ran away. I remember they picked up his wallet that was lying on the road, and they ran away, got into their highest van and took off.
Isn't it true that years later, or sometime later, when it was identified who did it, that Lasantha decided to forgive those people, 2 of them?
Yes. Not the person who gave the order.
No,
yes,
we know that.
Yes.
We know that.
But the people who actually were in the assault, took part in the assault, yes. One of the guys had gone to the lead office many years later when I think John Amratunga initiated an inquiry. And he had told Lasantha that he was in the police force. He had been attached to the PSD at that time.
The Presidential Security Department.
Yes. Division, yes.
Division.
And that he was part of the assault, and he was very sorry, and that he had children to feed, and that he was worried because they were going to have an internal inquiry within the police, and that if they found him guilty, he would lose his job, and that would have leave his children, hungry. So Lasantha, as usual, mention of children and all that tugged at his heartstrings. So immediately he said, no, I'm going to write to the IGP. And he went and met Lal and told Lal, I need to write to the IGP and say that these are not the people who are responsible. They were carrying out orders. And Lal, being of a tougher breed than Lasantha, said, no, you shouldn't create such precedents. But Lasantha went ahead and wrote that letter. So that's what I said. He didn't carry any personal grudges as well.
And that man and his family are probably today living on part of their life must be on that pension because it's so many years later.
Could be.
But what drove Lasantha? What sort of tickled his fancy?
Lasantha, as you know very well, he was a unique character. He was a very, very funny man. He was he was such a prankster. He would pull our family members, people in office, everybody would be at the butt end of his practical joke. He's a funny man. But at the same time, he had this deep sense of responsibility towards Sri Lanka. He loved Sri Lanka as a country. I know many people later thought, no, he was a traitor, but he wasn't. He really deeply cared for the country. So that drove him. And he thought that the people of this country had suffered enough under this jackboot of tyranny of all these successive governments of these presidents. And he took it upon himself, I guess, to lay bare all the transgressions of our leaders and but everything that was happening, all the scandals. So he thought he had to uncover all these scandals because he felt for the people. He really felt for the people of the country, and he knew that this was the taxpayer money. So ultimately, what drove him was his love for Sri Lanka and the people.
Those years must have been terrible. Terrible in the sense that there must have been constantly the threat of being attacked and so on. I mean, I remember very clearly the edition that said that this is the edition, ladies and gentlemen, that Lasantha Wickrematunge, in his inimitable style, decided to try and bypass the censor. And this was when he said that Palali Airport had not been attacked.
That's right, yes.
And so it was quite inventive.
Very inventive,
Yeah.
yes. I don't know how he got that idea, but he wanted to look for a way to get around the censor. So there was this huge debacle in Palali, but nobody knew the real truth because there was a strict censorship in place, and Lasantha had already received a warning. And he just wanted to give the story because he thought that, there was a lot of rumor going on, and he remembered what happened with rumor in 83. We had such a terrible disaster.
Yeah.
So he said, no, we have to give the people the story, but how are we going to get around this? And he came up with this brilliant idea. He came rushing into the newsroom, into the computer room where I was doing the page with the girl who was doing the thing. He said, okay, type the story. So we are typing. And then every statement is preceded by not. Mm-hmm. And so he went on, the entire story was typed, and I said, Lasantha, how can we get away with this? No, don't worry. And he was very careful. He didn't put it in the first edition. This went only in the final edition.
Okay.
So, and it went to print like that. And on Monday morning, of course, they stormed the press and sealed it.
Technically, he had beaten the censor.
He beat the censor, yes.
How many months was that closed down thereafter?
I think we were closed for about 1.5 months because we went to courts, and on some legal technicality we got away with it. It was to do with the appointment of the censor not being valid.
Were these fun times, really?
There were
Although
lots
they
of
were
fun
serious.
times. Yes, they were serious, but with Lasantha everything is a fun time.
Yeah. Including the way he used to summon the peon.
That's right. So you
would
remember
whistle.
that, yeah, with the two fingers. Yeah.
I never worked with Lasantha, but I would from time to time go and urge him to write different stories. And on one occasion, I was there, and midstream he whistled, and I thought he was quite mad. And he said, "Oh, sorry, that's how I call the peon."
Yes.
Yes, I remember that. 14 years on, and Lasantha Wickrematunge was known to be sympathetic towards the United National Party, and I suppose in comparison to the other parties that were in power. And if you read the Sunday Leader then, you'd always be inspired to think that this dreadful government was on its way out, and you'd have the new government led by the UNP in power. With all that kind of leaning, although I must say that he didn't care which party it was, if there was corruption and Lasantha was uncovering it, then he uncovered it anyway. But with all that, when Ranil Wickremesinghe and Maithripala Sirisena, so it's really, you may say it's the Sirisena-Wickremesinghe government, but I prefer to think that it was the Wickremesinghe-Sirisena government, because It was all, the driving seat was Ranil Wickrematunge. So we had the Apalane government. It was supposed to be open and, good governance and all that. And it is on that basis, most probably, that the majority of Sri Lankan voters were misled and voted them into power. But nothing really of any substance happened about the investigation into Lasantha's killing. Unlawful, we have to presume it was unlawful. How do you feel about that?
Yes, so Lasantha was very close to most of the UMP hierarchy, very close to them, and of course to Ranil. So when the Hapalana government came in, we were absolutely delighted. Ahimsa was whooping in joy. She was so happy because we thought finally we were all going to get answers, not only just for Lasantha, but all the others who were killed before that.
But also, Raina, let me just interject there for a minute, because we may forget that Mahinda Rajapaksa lost on the day that Lasantha was killed, on the anniversary.
That's right. So,
so that was like poetic justice. But, so go on, tell me, what transpired? Here this party had won, the good governance, the good guys had won.
Yes, so especially at the end of 2015, we had the investigation handed over to IP Nishantha Silva and his team of people. I think Tisera, Sisira Tisera was part of that team. So they were making a lot of headway. So we were all delighted. We thought, oh my God, this is happening finally. And they were making a lot of headway, very, very exhaustive research. They were going around the country, interviewing people, doing DNA samples. And all this was happening. But then, of course, the political winds were changing. Little by little, things were changing, and the bickering was happening between the two at the top.
Between the president and the prime minister.
Yes, and then suddenly we realized that the winds are blowing in favor of the Rajapaksas once again. And 15, 16, 17, by the time 18 rolled along, it was, quite obvious that nothing was happening and that they were scuttling the investigation. In fact, that's what we felt. And actually we got information that it was being scuttled willfully. So, and then suddenly in 2019, I think it was, Nishantha Silva was suddenly given marching orders. It was transferred. But of course, there was a huge, big hue and cry, and Ahimsa wrote an open letter that was published to Maithripala Sirisena, and I think that was a big embarrassment for him. So they cancelled that transfer order, and Nishantha was back. But by then we knew that nothing was going to happen.
Ladies and gentlemen, Nishantha Silva is of course the police officer who fled the country no sooner the election, I think on the night of the elections that saw Gotabaya Rajapaksa elected. But he left the country. He's somewhere outside of Sri Lanka. But appearing at the trial at The Hague, he gives some compelling evidence, and that part of that evidence is that it transpires as to how and who did kill Lasantha. Do you want to tell us about a bit of that evidence?
Yes, so giving evidence,
testimony.
Yes, what he said was he took us back to the Keith Noya abduction and torture, and he gave evidence saying that through telephone records and other means of investigation, they discovered that they zoned in on what was called the Tripoli platoon, which was part of what was being run under the DMI, the Directorate of Military Intelligence. So then telephone records showed that certain officers, actually what happened was after Keith was abducted, his editor, Lalit Talhakon, contacted other people, and then at that time the police, the minister, Karu Jayasuriya, contacted him, and Karu in turn called Mahinda. Mahinda called, now this is all they got the telephone records, right? He called Gotabaya. Gotabaya made a few calls, and finally they get the signal from Keith's phone, Keith Noya's phone, and the guy who is supposed to be torturing.
Both at the
same time in Dompe, in that safe house in Dompe.
On that note, in between this very compelling tale let's go ahead and take a peek at this evening's headlines from the Primetime News team. We'll see you on the other side of the break with Rain Wickrematunge.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
Ceylon Petroleum Corporation Podujana Peramuna trade union leader did not inform the party about the strike, says Gamini Lokuge. Trade unions should be banned and arsonists should be sent for rehabilitation, says Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna. Issues must be resolved in Parliament and not on the streets, says the President. We need to win back confidence. That is essential, asserts Harsha De Silva. Minor tremor reported in seas off Kalutara. DIG Nalaka Silva, who was interdicted for plotting to assassinate Maitri and Gotabaya, reinstated.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And welcome back to this edition of Newsline Recording, and I think we should title it Unbowed and Unafraid, the Lasantha Wickrematunge story as written by Rain Wickrematunge in her new book, which is available for the first time in Sri Lanka. And it is a compelling read. So tell me, so Nishanta actually with his testimony at The Hague, you're able to connect the dots. Most people are.
Yes, so what Nishanta told us was that from the evidence that he gathered with the Keith Noya case, he was able to tie that up with Lasantha's as well, through fingerprint evidence as well. So he believed that, he found out that the same people were involved in Lasantha's killing.
Do you remember the exact moment that you were told that your husband had been killed?
Yeah, that was a very difficult day.
Are you able to go through that?
It's a bit difficult because reliving that particular day is very difficult.
But you remember it exactly?
Oh, yes.
Were you in Australia?
I was in Australia, in Melbourne, yeah.
Most people in the media world and who would follow Lasantha's fabulous Suranimala
Yes.
and the Sunny leader would remember precisely what they were doing.
Definitely. I think everybody knows what they were doing when Lasantha Wickrematunge was.
How about the children, Rain?
Children now?
Yeah.
How are they faring now?
I mean, obviously, how are they doing now? Are they getting over the trauma?
Yes, they have got over the trauma, but strangely enough, the youngest, Adesh, who was just 10 at the time Lasantha died, he distanced himself from everything. He didn't talk much about the father. Of course, on the day it happened, he was devastated. But he didn't talk much. He didn't know much about the father's work and all that. But strangely enough, after the Aragalaya started, he started reading up all these things. He saw the Aragalaya activists with placards of his father, and then he thought, oh, so my father, was somebody who really had left a mark on Sri Lanka. And then he started reading up on Lasantha, and he became very, very, I think he was moved by the fact that he had a father who was such an iconic figure.
And Rain, do you believe, and do your children believe, they're now adults, do you all as a family believe that one day, someday, justice will be done?
Yeah, we always have hope. We should never give up hope. So I think, yes, there might come a day when we see justice finally.
I remember a conversation I had with Lal Wickrematunge not long after I started work at the Leader. And he was peering into his computer when I walked in. And he said, hey, look, and it swiveled it around. And there was a story about some murder that had happened in the US. And justice had taken 17 years in that case. And he said, I think I got time. We've got time. And I said, you're going to wait 17 years? He said, well, I'm going to wait as long as I have to. Do you also believe that this is going to happen? One day it will happen?
Yeah, I do believe that it will happen. I do believe.
Why do you think that Lasantha was targeted then? Why not some other editor? Why Lasantha? Was it because of his style of writing? Because he exposed everything else?
Yeah, of course, yes, of course. It's because he was the only one at that time who was
Is it any
uncovering
particular
all this.
story?
Well, there were many stories that he was working on, and we thought, okay, so he's going to get attacked now, he's going to get killed now. But then at that last few months, he was working on the MiG story and making a lot of revelations on that. So anybody would naturally believe that it had something to do with the MiG story, because that was when all this
It's sort of pointed that way.
pointed that way, yes.
And of course, tellingly, the MiG story has never been finished
No.
properly.
No.
Do you think that the way things are going, well, we have Mr. Wickrematunge as the president this time, not the sort of prime minister and playing second fiddle. He's in charge now. Have you met him?
Met him
This time as the president?
No, I haven't.
Perhaps you should send him a book.
Yeah, perhaps.
Do you have any confidence that this lot, this time, this president will do something about the murder of Lasantha Wickrematunge?
Absolutely not. I mean, they had so long to do it from 2015 until 2019. So why now? No, it won't happen under this government.
When you saw the Aragalaya people also carrying placards of Lasantha and so on, what were you feeling? Tremendous pride or what?
Yeah, tremendous pride that all these young people, they would have been very young, you know, very, they would have been kids. But to think that they were still being inspired by Lasantha's message, you know, of courage and not bow, as Lasantha himself said, standing tall and bowing to no man. To think that even now people were still, you know, carrying Lasantha's picture around and agitating, calling for, as they called, for change. That was very, very touching and very inspiring for us as well, and for his children.
Did any of the children come during that time?
They did not.
Are they frightened of coming to Sri Lanka?
Not really. Ahimsa has inherited her father's fearlessness. Sometimes to the, I don't know, I'm not sometimes too happy about that. She wants to come to Sri Lanka. She wanted to come and take part in the Aragalaya, but anyway, it didn't happen. No, so she's not scared. But the other two haven't shown much. They have not had a need to come as such. They are involved in their own lives. But I'm sure both Avinash and Adesh will come to Sri Lanka.
The memory of their dad and the memory of this wonderful journalist, Lasantha Wickrematunge, that must be growing in there, and must be fresh in their memory.
It is. Every time they read something new about him, every time some YouTuber talks about their father, there's a program on him, or when they read an article, yes, of course, it all comes back to them. Ahimsa, of course, is constantly following everything that happens with her father.
You know, this so-called trial in The Hague, it might not have any legal bearing, but it is an opportunity for the other side to be heard in a country whose administration doesn't appear to want to let the other side be heard in this matter. Was that did that give you a lot of courage and a lot of hope?
It did, actually. Yeah, like you said, although it didn't have any legal bearing, it sort of gave us a bit of closure to think that, okay, so they found the government guilty of this murder. It gave us bit of closure, and the fact that it created so much awareness, again, on Lasantha's case, the spotlight on his case, yes, we were happy.
Do you have conversations with Lasantha?
Yeah, we do. Lasantha appears in our dreams quite a bit.
Oh, it does.
I think I told you about the dream where he
Do you want to share that story?
Yeah. So a few years after I think about 2 years after he died, or even before that, he appeared in my dream. Suddenly he came to the house and he told me, "Rain, I came to tell you about the accident." And I said, "What accident, Lasantha?" And he just repeated the same sentence, "I came to tell you about the accident," and then he disappeared. So I woke up and I thought, oh, what was he trying to say? Then I thought, oh, he was warning me about something. Anyway, I forgot about it. I told it to friends and all that. I forgot about it. And 2 weeks later, I had this huge smash up with another car. So once everything was over, I told Lasantha, next time give me dates.
Yeah, which edition this is going into? Yeah. Is it the late edition or the city edition?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when you're in your own private moments, do you think that what Lasantha did was worth it?
I don't know, as somebody, as the mother of his children, somebody who...
You're the victim.
Yeah, it's difficult to say because this is what Lasantha wanted anyway. He wouldn't have had it any other way. So for us, yes, we can say no, he shouldn't have. He had children. He should never have put himself in such a dangerous situation. But for Lasantha, that was what drove him every day, every single day. He woke up to, uncover some scandal or the other that affected the country.
So was it worth it?
No, still I would say it wasn't worth it.
Because of the devastation that it left you and the children.
That's right.
Because they haven't had in there, especially your young one, he's not had his dad for the bulk of his life.
That's
now.
right.
And are they hopeful? I mean, I wish I had been able to interview them, but are they hopeful that one day justice will be done?
I believe they do. They do. They think that justice will be done someday, but not under these leaders that we have seen in the past several years now.
Well, the Unbowed and Unafraid, the story of Lasantha Wickrematunge, the Lasantha Wickrematunge biography written by Rain Wickrematunge, is out now, and it tells you all about the life of this very remarkable man, friend of the Capital Maharaja Group, friend of our chairman, who was very, very fond of him, and a friend of the thousands and thousands of people who read his fabulous column, Suranimala. And I'm sure they'll always miss him. But they will all be looking for collective closure as to what happened. We'd like the real story. And somebody out there knows that real story. And somebody out there had better watch out, because Lasantha Wickrematunge's children, Ahimsa, they've got time on their hands. It may take more than 17 years, as Lal predicted some years ago. But Rain Wickrematunge, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here.
It's been fabulous, and I'm ever so glad from a personal point of view that you've written a book.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you
and
very
take care.
much.
That is the way it was on Newsline Recording this evening. Take care, have a great evening as much as you can, and God bless you all.